I forgot to turn my mic on, so good morning again. We'll try that one more time. Good morning, everybody. Col here. Happy Mother's Day to everybody. So we're going over it again. You may see that I have a different setup here today. I've got two tables set up. Don't do it very often, but when I've got lots of things to do, I have a bit of a setup. Now, during the show, we've had sound problems with Pammy's mic, so you may hear her dulcet tones in the background. If she has a question, I'll repeat the question and then I'll give an answer to it if I can. So we'll take it from there. Now, Derek, if you have your email address and your contact details, could you flick them up onto the page for us? I'm going to be talking about your radius jig this morning, so that will be on the air. And I'm sure I'm going to get a few questions about it later down the track. So if you could put them up for us, that'd be great. Now, lots of different things today, so you're going to have to pay a fair bit of attention because we're going to go through the drawer system that we use for the cabinet. As you can see, I've got a set already here made. I made those last week. That's what's during the week. That was for this drawer here, this cabinet here. So as you can see, the timber in the drawer is a little different. It's a lighter grade of cedar, and of course I'm using silver ash on the sides to give a bit of contrast as well. So they will fit in there. They're not quite in there yet, but they need to be glued together and sanded, and then they will fit. So we are going to be doing a fair bit of work to get these today. We want to do a whole set, and I'm going to use Chris Clark's article as a base behind what we do, right? So the article itself is based on Japanese principles of centering. Okay, so we're going to go through that. Now I've changed it a little bit. There are various reasons why I've done that, and I'll go through those as we go through it. So I'll just put all this stuff aside. I'll just leave that there for the moment because I will be discussing various things on it. Now, on the article, you'll notice in the article that Chris has got 3 drawers, all uneven sided, or uneven widths I should say, and he has set, when he set the centre line, he did it in the middle of the jig with a stop either side. Now, that was brilliant, how that works. And it gave a really nice outline and a really nice display of the dovetails. You can see them in the picture. So have a read of the article. One of the boys, who was it, Aussie, I think, said you can download the article for $5 from Woodsmith, so you can get that anyway. So
just show us the cover. Show the cover again.
That's what the cover is. That's what the article. So if you see it in a newsagent, by all means pick it up, and you can follow along a little bit of what I've done. So it's issue 168. Okay, so we're going to go and have a little play with that today and go through the techniques. So I'll put that aside and we'll deal with that later. Now, the thing here is we have 2 tables. I'm going to be using both tables to speed up the operation. Normally I would use one table and I would just go through it very gently and very carefully and all that sort of stuff, but we want to speed it up. I've got 5 drawers to make. Okay, so, and they're all different sizes. You can see when I lay them out, they're all different widths, all different heights. So I could have made them all the same, as I have done with the box over here. All of these drawers that I made for the other box, they're all the same size. Now you can do that if you like, it's not going to be an issue. But what we're going to do is use the centre technique to actually get these laid out. Now, here's the thing. When I put them up here, you can see when we look here, you can see all those dovetails nice and evenly spaced out. There's a gap in a space in between each of them. Can't have 3 on this one here, but we can have 2, right? So we've got that space there. The second one up is pretty much the same. Now, I get a pointing article, a pointing object. What you'll notice here is the distance from the edge of the dovetail to the edge of the box is different on this one. You'll see that the distance from there to the edge of the thing is different again. Okay, so even though there is a difference in the sizes, you can see that we've got nice even layout. When we put the next one up there, you can see exactly the same process, and we've got these lovely 2 dovetails. Right? Now, all those four boxes were made on our H20. This one didn't work on the H20, so we had to revert to the H10. So not only am I using 2 tables, but I'm going to be using 2 jigs, 2 different templates, the H20 and the H10. So we're going to do that. I want to have exactly the same effect on this box as I do on all of the others, and I'll show you why we're going to revert to the H10 when we get there. All right, so the first thing I have to do is prep material, which I've done, and I have all of that here. So to get my material right, of course you're going to need the bottoms of the boxes as well. What I need to do is make sure that my side piece is actually the same depth as the box, and I make it exactly the same. If you want to make it a little bit longer, by all means do that. Then you can sand off the back edge of it, or you can sand off the front edge, but we're going to put a face on it anyway. And my front pieces have to be 1 millimetre wider than the opening in the box. Right? That way when I sand it off, I'm going to get a nice, neat, even fit when the drawer fits in there, so it fits the cavity. Right? So that's what we measure for. Incidentally, if you weren't watching last week, you'll notice that I put a finish on the inside. Now the finish has darkened a little bit. You can see it's quite dark now. It will get another coat, but ostensibly I've sanded everything and done all the inside, and I've sanded off the front face of it too, so I've got a nice clean front face. So that's what's done. So the box is pretty much finished. Now the steps we need to take here. If you look in here, you can see inside the box, in this particular box, what I've done. Which way do you want it? You can see in here I've got 2 screws. They're only tiny. There's one there and there's one there, right? And then we've got a centre screw which holds the nut in, the knob in place, right? It's also glued. So what we have to do is prepare for these 2 screws. Don't worry about the centre one, but we'll worry about the 2 small screws, right? So we need to do that beforehand for the same reason we had to put the screws into the top of the box. So for the same reason for doing those, you can't get at it, and you have to do it beforehand. So drilling and countersinking before you actually cut your dovetails is really a good idea. Now I've done that to all my pieces. The inside is sanded. There's my outside, and I've drilled and countersunk a little hole there. Now I'm just going to show you how I go about that with a different box that one of the other boxes that I'm making. So I'll just get a piece of that material. And this is how I set it up. These are the rose mahogany bits. So I've got hue and pine and rose mahogany. The reason I've got hue and pine with the rose mahogany rather than the silver ash is the hue and pine has a richer colour, and the rose mahogany is a very rich colour when it's finished up. So I was trying to keep a sort of a bit of a context between the two by having the richer colours together with the box, and that's just my idea of how to make it look nice. So I've chosen the front piece, and I put 2 marks on, one here and one there, right? So there's two marks on there, and then I've set up my drill press so that I get an even layout of all of the holes. So I'll drill a hole here and a hole here, measured in 40 millimeters. And so we'll just go over to the drill press. Now the drill press, the drill bit that I've got here is a tiny little one, and it has a countersinking collar on it that you can shift up and down the drill bit. So you can shift it up and down. I haven't got it very far on. I don't need a lot there because I'm not drilling a deep hole. And I've got my stop set at 40 millimeters. So all a matter of doing now is to drill the hole. So on the line. Spin it round. And drill another little hole. Okay, I'll just do that again on a different piece. Here's another piece of that same box. So you can repeat this with all 5 pieces. Okay, back to the bench. Now what I've done is I've got all the holes now, and that's just the front panel of the box. So the screw will go through there, and then I'll glue the piece on the back of it after I've cut my dovetails. So I'll put those ones aside, back where they belong, and we'll work on the one we're working on at the moment. Okay, now this is where we have to have a little bit of thought. On Chris Clark's article, what he has done is he has put a centre line down the middle of the timber on the inside, not on the outside, but on the inside. So I have a centre line, just a light centre line, didn't draw it hard because I'm going to remove it anyway, down the track, and we line that up with the centre line on the jig. So I'll just put this aside because that one's going to be used with the H10, and we'll go with the H20. So here's my jig. Now you'll notice that what Chris did was he stopped set up like that on the page, and set up his centre line, and then set the stops. Right. Now what happened then was when he went to a different width piece of timber, he would set the centre line up on the same one and then bring the stop in to meet and bring that stop in to meet as well. Now that worked fine for his project. It doesn't work with this one because on the narrower pieces of timber, if you line up with the centre line, you can see the clamp overlaps the edge of the piece of timber and it interferes with the stop. So that won't work with this one. Also, what happens is he can do, if he does 4 boxes, then it's a relatively simple task. You've only got 16 pieces of timber you have to cut. I've got 5 boxes. Oh, sorry, he had 3, so 3, that's 12. He had 12. Yeah, my maths is right. So he had 12 pieces to work with. I've got 5 boxes, which is 20 pieces.
Many drawers.
5 drawers, yeah. Well, I call them boxes anyway, because basically they are a box frame. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use both ends of the jig. Now the technique is going to be exactly the same as if I was making an uneven sided box, only this time all my parts are going to be evenly spaced, and I have to space out my dovetails so that they're nice. Now, I set it up before I started, and one of the problems I had was, as soon as I set up the first one, I've got this lovely layout of three dovetails, which is the same as this one here. Right? It's the same as that one there. When I went to do the second one, put it on the same mark, I ended up with 1 dovetail. I thought, well, that's not good enough. That's not going to work. What has to happen is I have to have 2 centre lines. So I need to have that there so that I get 2 dovetails. Okay, and you can see I've got 2 centre lines. You just have to make sure that you use the right one when you're using your pieces of, when you're cutting your pieces of material. So this is what I did. I measure the centre. Okay, so if I find my centre mark, same on the other end. Draw myself a line through the middle. Now I don't want it very dark because I don't want it to be impregnated into the timber. So just light enough so that I can see it. I don't know if you can see that on the screen, but it's very, very light.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you can just see it. Yeah, so it's not very dark, and I'm going to scrub that off before I actually fit the whole lot together. So I don't want a heavy mark on it. Now I've done the others. I think I did this one here. Yes.
So you can make pencil marks on the top face of the backing board and put H10, H20 on those marks?
No, this is a H20. That's the H10.
Right, okay. Differentiate.
Did somebody ask that question?
No.
Oh, you did, okay. All right, Pammy just asked about putting a H10 or a H20 mark on here. This is a H20, so we're working with a H20 template. You can see that the spacings are much wider than our H10.
What I mean is you can differentiate with those 2 marks what's for the small drawer, smaller drawers, or why have you got the 2 marks there?
So that I get an even layout of wide boards and narrow boards.
Right,
okay. So this, you can see the difference between the 2 templates. You can see this one here is a little bit narrower, and when we used a narrow board, I can get the same effect just by sitting that in there and getting my 2 dovetails. Right, so it's a bit of a fiddle. If you don't have 2, we've got plenty for sale. So now set up. So all I need to do here now, because we've got all our centering marks, what I have to do here is set my pieces of timber in place. So I've got my centre mark on my large piece of timber. I send it up on my centre line. If you're accurate about this, you should have it right. You only need the one side. I hope I'm not confusing everybody. Do the same on the other side. And you can see, I'll turn this around, you can see that I'm lined up with my centre line. And then all I do there is bring my stop up, make sure it's right. Okie doke. Right. So what I've done is I've set up both ends of my jig. So I can put one piece there and I can put the other piece there, making sure my face side mark is out and the bottom of the box is at the stop. Okay. I haven't had to mark anything on this piece of timber. I've only marked one piece of timber, so we can clean up. We only have to clean up one piece of timber. When I rotate those, this one will go to here, and this one that was here will go to here. All right, that's the same technique we use for an uneven-sided box. Now, dovetails. I'll shift these boxes. Always have that space issue. Now, we're going to use H10 cutters, and the H10 cutters work with the H20 as well. They're exactly the same, right? There's no difference between that H10 and H20 when it comes to the cutters. The important thing to remember here, before you begin, give them a bit of a scrub. Okay, so scrub them off and a tiny little bit of oil. Now don't forget, this is a really good one. This is the one from Japanese Tools. A little bit of oil, and I don't want much, just a drop. And there's my maintenance. Okay, so that one's going to go into that router. This one's going to go into this router. All right, now, let's get all this stuff out of the way. I'll put it over there because then I can get it set up. Adjust my height. Remember, use your opposing piece of material, just in case you're using two different thickness materials. And remember, the important thing here is that your timber needs to be, I better tighten it around a bit. The important thing to remember here is make sure your timber is perfectly parallel along its width, okay, and perfectly square on the ends. This technique will come unstuck very quickly if that doesn't occur. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm setting to 0.5 millimetre . Come up a tiny bit more. That's it. Okay, I'm setting to 0.5 millimetre there. Then we come across to this jig, this router, and we'll do the same thing. Tighten up nice. Use the opposing piece of material because I'm going to be using this one to cut the pins. Perfect. Okay, so we're set up, ready to go. Okay, so I've got both jigs set up. And need two of those. Need all this stuff off here. I've got my jig set up for the wide board. Just check that. It looks pretty good. Check this side. That looks just as good. Actually, this one needs to be shifted a little bit. I think that's about it there. And I'll check this one again. looks pretty right. Okay. Now clamp one piece on. Just making sure my face side mark is out and the bottom of it is pointing at my stop. My second piece, same process, face side mark out. Now we're pretty much ready to go. I'll just recheck this one. Okay, time to cut. So ears on, everybody. And so there we have our panels. Okay, these are two side panels for the larger board. Now it's just a matter of turn the jig around. Do not move the stops. Keep them where they are, because remember you're doing the wide board at this stage. There is no need to put a centre line on the other side because you have it already set up, ready to go. So now we move over to the second jig. Ears on. Just a little test. Fits perfect. Now a quick dry assemble of this one. And dry assemble it before you actually move anything for the next bit. Really nice fit. Don't forget to do your test joints before you start fiddling around. You only need to do one with the material that's the same thickness. And there's frame number 1. And as you can see, beautiful layout of joints. Just sits so nice. They look like they've been hand cut. And everything's flush on the top. Everything's flush on the bottom. And we get with this beautiful job. Okay, right, now, so that's box number 1, or frame number 1. Frame number 2. Let's go back to our jig. At this point, we don't need to change anything. All we need to do is leave your setup exactly the same, because all of our pieces of timber are the same thickness. So the important thing to remember is don't touch anything at this stage. What we need to do is set the jig up. Now, as you can see, I've got 2 centre lines. If I use the same centre line as my wider board, you would see I only get 1 dovetail in there because of the width of the timber, right? But where my second centre line is, if I shift that along to the centre line, second centre line, I just line that up so it's nice and even. Okay, it's right on the centre line. Shift my stop to the piece of timber, lock it in place. And do the same on the other end. Make sure, like I said earlier, if your timber is not square, this can come unstuck very, very quickly. So it's a good idea. Just make sure everything is accurately cut. Check your machines that you're cutting your stuff on. And there we have the second one ready to cut. Okay. So clamp on. Oh, I've got it right the way around. Put my other board on. And we're locked in, just checking, just make sure everything is right. I'm going to have to recheck this one. It doesn't look right. I moved it during its setup. It's got it. Like I say, just make sure everything is in the right place and everything is accurate, and that way you will have a perfectly aligned job. Okay, so we're all ready to go. So over to the dovetails. Ears on. Again, don't change anything except the timber on the jig. Now, if you don't have two router tables and access to two router tables and access to two routers, you have to do all this individually. So you have to change and set up your router bits every single time. Fuse on. Okay, there's frame number 2. Goes that way, I think. Okay, so there we have frame number 2. And as you can see, with the holes here, I can actually get in there and put the screws in. So it's just a matter of dropping a couple of screws in there and joining it up. And we go on again. So if I was doing number 3, and I'm not going to do this, I'm going to pretty much I'll just show you how to do the smaller one, because we've got to change jigs. But this would be exactly the same process. Set up your centre mark on here, set this one up here as well, and then go through the process. So you would do that with these two as well. Okay, so I've got 2 more that would be done with the H20. All right, so there's 2 more that would be done there. The problem with the smaller one, which is the top box, is I can't get an even layout where I'm going to get a decent pair of dovetails. It's not going to work on here, no matter where I put it on the jig. I could put it centered there, but I would have a half a dovetail top and a half dovetail on the bottom, but I don't want that. I want to have 2 dovetails in the center of the piece of timber. So we revert to the H20. Oh, sorry, we revert to the H10, yes. Same process, center line down the middle. I've already marked out where I want to set my center line, or where I want to set the center of the piece of timber. And center. I don't have to change the router bits or do anything with the router bits at all. I can leave it as it is. Get that in the centre, bring up my stop. Now, have a look how much overhang we have when we put the clamp on here. Oops, I'm going to put it up the right way. It's up that way. You can see how much overhang I've got there. That overhang is not going to help if you're working in the middle of the jig, because that would interfere with this. And so we have that set up, so off to our dovetail jig. Ears on, everybody. It shifted during the lockup. We're good now. So now you can see that I've got the two dovetails nicely spaced on the piece of timber. So they look pretty nice. And with the pins, I'll turn my jig around. Second piece. Looks pretty nice. So ears on, everybody. I was just having a little read there, Pammy. You may notice that on the cedar, you get a little bit of fluffy tear out. It's nothing to be concerned about. It's the nature of cedar. Just got to make sure I've got that the right way up. This one's a little tighter. Probably I took one of the shims out. Now I think I've taken too much out. Oh no, it's going to go in. Just tap it in. This one's not going to go in. A little bit of fur in there. So there we have the small box. And when you compare that to this box, you'll see very, very similar. And it has the same sort of visual effect. Okay, so spread out over two, spread out over two, and of course I'll do that with the others. Now, I've got 10 minutes left, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut for the base, and I was going to try and sand the corners of a thing, I think, but what will happen now is I think we'll get just a little bit of this done, and then we'll have to stop and let you go and have your Mother's Day with your mothers, if that's what you're doing, and then we'll get on with it a bit more. Now, one of the things that I was going to talk about was the radius jig that I set up. Now, before I go too much further, this one was made by Derek Lark. Right? Now, I think Derek has put up his contact details, so he's on the chat there at the moment. This has got 11mm radius because that's basically what we need for the timber that we're using and with the router bits that we're using, but he does make them at different sizes. So if you contact Derek, I'm sure he'll make you one. I can't remember how much he was charging for them, but you know, a few bob his way wouldn't go astray. He'll let you know how much they are anyway. So all I've done is he sent me this one, and I've just attached it to a piece of timber. Now, my stops, excuse me, the reason I've got the stops on is because I don't want this edge here hitting the sander. Also, I don't want my fingers hitting the sander. So I've got these two stops. Now, these two stops are actually shelf supports. 5mm hole, drilled in with a little shelf support on there, and it comes up with a perfect little stop for the timber as well. Okay, so have a chat to Derek, and I'm sure he'll fix you up. I've just attached it to that. That will sit on my sander. I'm going to be using the one that I've developed, which is made of aluminium, and take it from there. So I had a lot of questions during the week about the radius jig, and when I'm actually using it, I'll explain a little bit more about it. So let's get this stuff out of the way, and I'll set up for cutting the floors. Now I need to put a rebate in the bottom of the boxes. I'm looking for somewhere to put the jig, and I've got a perfectly well made fence for it. Okay, so the router bit I'm using is one of the router bits in our Ultimate Cutter Kit. You can buy it individually if you like. TGRC is the code for it. The RC stands for rebate cutter. And I always advise people to purchase the big bearing as well. The big bearing, well, it's going to reduce our depth of cut. See, the depth of cut here is 5 millimetres. The big bearing will reduce our depth of cut to 1.5 millimetres, which will allow a nice clean beginning to cutting a trench. So I have that, put that aside because I'm going to use that again in a second. Now height to the bottom of the cutting tip, 2.5 millimetres. Two and a half millimetres. Now, the reason I do 2.5 millimetres is because I'm not going to cut feet in the box. Okay, so I'm not going to cut any feet in there. If I was cutting feet in there, I'll go to 10 millimetres, but I'm not. I'm going to 2.5 mil, and I don't need a whole lot there, so the floor's got to go in there. That will also give me plenty of depth in the box. Particularly when you're doing a little box, like a little frame like this or a little drawer like this, you haven't got a lot of material in here and a lot of space in there, so we don't want to take too much out. The material that I'm using for the base is 4 millimetre cedar. Okay, so I'm going to dress that up for the job. Okay, so first thing, safety. A little bit of tape. I did have an end here. There it is. Around the box. This is fibre reinforced tape. It's quite good for this process because it doesn't stretch. You'll notice I only press it down on the corners. If you press it down in the middle, particularly with cedar, it'll tend to tear a little bit of the grain out if you leave it on too long. So we're not going to leave it there very long at all. Might as well do this one while we're at it. Okay, now my first cut is going to be with the rotation of the router bit. Reason being is because climb routing will give you a cleaner cut. And so there you have a nice clean trench. The edges are beautiful because the climb routing will allow you to do that. We go again. will be the small one. Now all we're going to do today is get these three to this stage, and then next week we will continue with putting the floors in. I will have the other boxes cut, ready to use. Just putting the original bearing back in it. Now when we cut these, we cut with the against the rotation of the router bit, which is the correct way of using it. And okay, so that's where we're up to now. That's where we're going to stop today. I'm not going to make the frames for it. What I will do is I will finish up the other three boxes, get them all ready to go, and have everything set up next week, and I will go through the sanding process for the corners and get also go through some of the sanding process of fitting the boxes to the frames, and we'll have a look at putting fronts on them. So that's what will happen next week. So have a lovely day everybody, and we will all catch you next week.